Alright, picture this. It's like way before Instagram, like before. We're talking BCE, which in this case stands for before cinnamon everything. Sri Lanka, or as it was known back then, Taprobane, catchy right, was already a hotspot, geographically speaking, volcanoes, beaches, jungles, the works. Early civilizations popped up, because that's what humans do when there's no Netflix to distract them. Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa. These weren't just names you struggled to pronounce after a few lion beers, these were kingdoms. Kings, queens, palaces, the whole 9 yards. Think Game of Thrones, but with less incest and more coconuts. These guys were trading spices, gems, the good stuff. They even had irrigation systems that'd make a modern city planner weep with envy. So basically, ancient Sri Lanka was thriving. Until you guessed it, someone new showed up. But hey, more on that later. So, while the Romans were busy conquering everything except plumbing, they were also spreading their influence far and wide, leaving behind a legacy of architecture, governance, and culture. Meanwhile, Buddhism decided to take a chill pill, or rather, a chill island. This serene island, known today as Sri Lanka, became a sanctuary for the teachings of the Buddha. Around the 3rd century BCE, Emperor Ashoka of India was all like, "Hey son, you like boats? How about spreading this whole peace and enlightenment thing to that teardrop-shaped island over there?" Ashoka's son Mahinda took this mission to heart and set sail for Sri Lanka, carrying with him the profound teachings of Buddhism. And just like that, Buddhism went viral in Sri Lanka. Temples and stupas began to dot the landscape, becoming centers of spiritual and community life. Temples popped up faster than Starbucks in a gentrifying neighborhood. These sacred spaces became the heart of Sri Lankan society, where people gathered for worship, learning, and community events. Monasteries became the universities of their time, but with less student debt and more meditation. They were places of learning, where monks studied ancient texts and practiced mindfulness. This wasn't just some passing fad, folks. Buddhism became deeply rooted in the culture, influencing every aspect of life from art to daily rituals. Buddhism became woven into the fabric of Sri Lankan culture, influencing art, literature, and even the national cuisine's surprising lack of beef. The teachings of nonviolence and compassion extended to their dietary choices. Okay, maybe not the last one, but you get the idea. The influence of Buddhism was profound and long-lasting. To this day, Sri Lanka remains a predominantly Buddhist nation, with temples and monasteries continuing to play a central role in the community. This might explain why everyone seems so darn friendly all the time. The teachings of compassion and mindfulness have created a culture of warmth and hospitality that is felt by all who visit. Okay, back to those new arrivals we mentioned earlier. First up, the Portuguese. They were the first Europeans to set foot on Sri Lankan soil, arriving in the early 16th century with grand ambitions and a thirst for adventure. In the 16th century, they rocked up like that one friend who shows up unannounced, eats all your snacks, and overstays their welcome by, about 150 years. They built fortresses, established trading posts, and tried to convert the locals to Christianity. They were all about that cinnamon trade, turning Sri Lanka into their personal spice rack. Cinnamon was the gold of the time, and the Portuguese were determined to control this lucrative trade. They even fought battles to maintain their monopoly. Then came the Dutch in the 17th century, who were like, "Hey Portugal, we heard you had some prime real estate." And by heard, we mean saw from our ships while carrying 10 times the cannons you have. The Dutch East India Company was a force to be reckoned with. They took over the spice trade, introduced some questionable hairstyles, and even left behind a legal system that still confuses lawyers today. The Dutch were meticulous administrators, and their influence can still be seen in Sri Lanka's legal and architectural landscape. But the real party crashers were the British, arriving in the 18th century with their tea and their stiff upper lips. They saw the potential in Sri Lanka's fertile lands and decided to make it a cornerstone of their empire. They were all, "We'll just be taking this whole island now, thanks." The British Empire was at its peak, and they wanted to ensure that Sri Lanka played a crucial role in their global dominance. They flooded the place with tea plantations, built railroads for transporting said tea, and basically made Sri Lanka their personal tea garden. The introduction of tea transformed the island's economy and landscape. Not very zen, Brits. Not very zen at all. The legacy of these colonial powers is still evident in Sri Lanka today, from its legal systems to its cultural practices and of course its world-famous tea. Section 4, Independence Day, Sri Lanka gets a new landlord themselves. Fast forward to the 20th century and Sri Lankans were, understandably, over the whole being ruled by someone else thing. After a mostly peaceful independence movement, Gandhi would have been proud, Ceylon, as it was still called, finally got the boot from the Brits in 1948. There were celebrations, there were speeches, there was probably some awkward small talk with the departing British dignitaries. But hey, freedom at last. Now, what to do with it? Section 5, Island Feud, when Sri Lankan wasn't one thing. Remember all those kings and kingdoms from way back? Well, it turns out unifying an island is harder than it looks, especially when you've got ethnic tensions simmering below the surface. The Sinhalese majority and the Tamil minority, with their different languages, religions and grudges that went back centuries, started clashing. It wasn't pretty. From discrimination to riots to full-blown civil war, the next few decades were rough, folks. We're talking a generation scarred by violence, a country divided, and a whole lot of heartbreaking stories that don't fit into a lighthearted essay about history. The war finally ended in 2009, but the scars remain. It's a reminder that even in paradise, things aren't always sunny. Section 6. Healing and Hope Post-War Sri Lanka still figuring it out. So, the war's over, now what? Well, that's the million-rupee question, isn't it? Sri Lanka's been working on rebuilding, both literally and figuratively. They've got their work cut out for them, tackling issues like reconciliation, accountability, and that whole how to move on from a really messed up past thing. It's a work in progress, like that DIY project you started and may never finish, but there's hope, too. Tourism's booming again. Those beaches are hard to resist. The economy's trying to get its act together, and there's a new generation that's all about peace, unity, and finding the best kotu roti on the island. Section 7, Sri Lanka today. Come for the beaches, stay because you missed your flight, and kinda want to. So, where does that leave Sri Lanka today? It's a country that has seen its fair share of ups and downs, yet it remains resilient and ever inviting. Imagine a place where ancient temples sit in the shadow of modern skyscrapers, where history and progress coexist in a delicate balance. Picture yourself sipping a lion beer on the beach while listening to the call to prayer from a nearby mosque. It's a unique blend of experiences that you won't find anywhere else. It's a land of contrasts, of complexity, and of undeniable beauty. From the lush green mountains to the golden sandy beaches, every corner of Sri Lanka tells a different story. Sri Lanka's still got its problems, sure. The news might highlight the challenges, but there's so much more beneath the surface. The government can be about as reliable as a tuk-tuk with a flat tire, but the spirit of the people keeps the country moving forward. The economy's got its ups and downs, mostly ups thankfully, and despite the hurdles, there's a sense of optimism in the air. The political scene can be lively, let's say. It's a place where debates are passionate and the stakes are high, but through it all, the spirit of Sri Lanka endures. It's in the warmth of the people, their smiles and their unwavering hospitality. It's in the warmth of the people who welcome you with open arms and make you feel at home. The rhythm of the drums echoes the heartbeat of the nation, a constant reminder of its rich cultural heritage. The aroma of 1,000 curries fills the air, each dish telling a story of tradition and flavor. It's a place that gets under your skin, that stays with you long after you've left. The memories you make here are unforgettable. That stays with you long after you've left. You'll find yourself reminiscing about the vibrant culture, the stunning landscapes, and the incredible people. So go visit, why don't you? Experience it for yourself and see why so many fall in love with this island nation. Just make sure your visa's in order and your tolerance for spice is high. Sri Lanka awaits you with open arms and a world of adventures.